There's a silent war happening inside almost every human being, a war between caring too much and pretending not to care at all. Some people become prisoners of attachment. They attach themselves to people, opinions, outcomes, validation, memories, expectations, and slowly their peace becomes hostage to things they cannot control. But others go to the opposite extreme. After betrayal, they become emotionally numb. After disappointment, they shut down. After heartbreak, they stop feeling, and they call it strength. But detachment is not emotional death. Detachment is emotional mastery. There is a massive difference between being peaceful and being cold, between being calm and being disconnected, between protecting your energy and building walls around your soul. Most people never learn this distinction. They either drown in emotional dependence, or they isolate themselves so deeply that they lose the ability to love fully. True power lives in the middle. The ability to love without losing yourself, to care without becoming consumed, to walk away without hatred, to stay soft in a world that rewards hardness, that is the art of detachment. And today, you are going to master it. Because the truth is, your suffering is not coming from life itself. It is coming from your attachment to how life should be. Buddha taught this thousands of years ago. Suffering is born from attachment. Attachment to outcomes, attachment to identities, attachment to control. You suffer because you expect permanence in a temporary world. You expect people to stay the same forever. You expect circumstances to obey your plans. You expect love to always look the way you imagined it. But life changes, people change, feelings change, seasons change. Even you are changing every second. And the tighter you try to hold life, the more pain you create. Imagine holding water in your hand. If your grip is relaxed, the water remains. But the harder you squeeze, the faster it escapes between your fingers. That is how most people live. Desperate, clinging, controlling, and exhausting themselves emotionally. Detachment is not letting go of love. Detachment is letting go of control. That changes everything. Because when you stop trying to control everything, you finally begin to experience peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Read that again. Not outside events, not people, not timing, not outcomes. Your mind. That is your kingdom. But weak minds try to control the external world because they cannot control the internal one. Strong minds reverse this. They master themselves first. Most emotional pain comes from invisible contracts we create in our minds. I gave them love, so they should never hurt me. I worked hard, so life should reward me. I stayed loyal, so they should stay forever. But life never signed those contracts. And when reality breaks them, people collapse emotionally. Detachment means loving fully while understanding that nothing is guaranteed. Not because you're pessimistic, because you're awake. You understand the nature of reality. Everything is temporary. The body changes. Relationships evolve. Money comes and goes. Opportunities appear and disappear. And once you deeply understand impermanence, you stop panicking when things shift. You stop chasing stability in unstable places. You become grounded internally. Carl Jung believed that suffering intensifies when we build our identity around external things. When your identity depends on someone staying, their leaving destroys you. When your identity depends on success, failure destroys you. When your identity depends on validation, criticism destroys you. But detachment creates inner independence. You stop asking the world to define your worth, and that is freedom. The detached person is not emotionally unavailable. They simply refuse to abandon themselves for temporary comfort. Look carefully at emotionally attached people. Their moods depend on text messages. Their confidence depends on attention. Their peace depends on outcomes. They are emotionally outsourced. Their emotional state belongs to everybody except themselves. One compliment can make them feel alive, One rejection can destroy their entire week. That is not emotional sensitivity. That is emotional slavery. Detachment breaks those chains. It teaches you how to stand emotionally on your own feet, not because you stop loving people, but because you stop needing people to complete you. There's a difference, a massive difference. Need creates fear. Love creates freedom. When you need someone, you become afraid of losing them. And fear changes your behavior. You overthink, you chase, you tolerate disrespect, you abandon your boundaries, you betray your own standards. Fear makes people weak. But love without attachment is different. You can deeply love someone and still maintain your dignity. You can care without collapsing. You can give your heart without handing away your soul. This is why emotionally mature people appear calm during chaos. Not because they feel nothing, because they understand something. They understand that peace cannot depend on circumstances. If your peace depends on things staying perfect, you will never know peace because life is movement, and movement creates uncertainty. Detachment is learning to dance with uncertainty instead of fighting it. Think of a tree during a storm. The rigid tree snaps. The flexible tree survives. Emotionally attached people become rigid. They demand certainty from life. They demand guarantees from people. They demand permanence from temporary experiences. And eventually, reality breaks them. Detached people bend without breaking. They adapt, they flow, they trust themselves enough to survive change. That is true emotional resilience. Friedrich Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Detached people have an internal why. Their identity is rooted deeper than external circumstances. That's why they survive heartbreak better, failure better, loss better, because their entire existence is not built on one fragile thing. Now understand this carefully. Detachment does not mean becoming indifferent. Indifference is numbness. Detachment is awareness. Cold people suppress emotions. Detached people process emotions without becoming controlled by them. There's a huge difference. Suppression says, "I refuse to feel." Detachment says, "I will feel, but I will not drown." That distinction changes lives. Many people confuse emotional shutdown with healing, but avoiding pain is not healing pain. Ignoring emotions is not mastery. Real emotional mastery means you can sit with painful emotions without letting them define you. You can feel grief without becoming hopeless, feel anger without becoming destructive, feel rejection without losing self-worth. This is emotional intelligence at its highest level. The Stoics understood this deeply. They did not teach emotional suppression, they taught emotional discipline. Feel the emotion, observe it, understand it, but do not become possessed by it. Most people become possessed by emotions instantly. A bad mood becomes a bad day becomes a bad month, a rejection becomes an identity crisis. Detached people interrupt this chain. They create space between emotion and reaction. Viktor Frankl wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power. That space is where detachment lives." And most people never enter it. They react automatically. Someone ignores them. Insecurity activates. Someone criticizes them. Defensiveness activates. Something goes wrong. Panic activates. Their emotions control them like puppets. Detachment cuts the strings. It teaches you to pause, to breathe, to observe your emotions instead of immediately obeying them. And that single skill can transform your entire life, because your emotions are not always truth. Sometimes your emotions are wounds speaking. Sometimes your anxiety is abandonment trauma. Sometimes your anger is unresolved pain. Sometimes your attachment is fear of loneliness. Detached people learn to investigate emotions instead of blindly trusting them. This creates wisdom, and wisdom creates peace. Now, let's talk about one of the biggest reasons people struggle with detachment. They fear being alone. Not physically alone, emotionally alone. Most people stay attached because silence terrifies them. When the distractions disappear, they are forced to meet themselves. and many people have spent their entire lives avoiding themselves. That's why they cling to relationships that drain them, situations that disrespect them, connections that destroy their peace, because emptiness feels scarier than suffering. But detached people discover something powerful. Solitude is not emptiness, it is clarity. When you stop needing constant noise, you begin hearing your real self. Your intuition grows louder. Your standards become clearer. Your self-respect deepens, and slowly, you stop settling. You stop begging for love that should come naturally. You stop forcing connections. You stop chasing people who already decided not to choose you. That is not bitterness. That is self-honor. And self-honor is one of the highest forms of detachment. Because when you truly value yourself, you stop emotionally negotiating your worth. You stop shrinking to keep people comfortable. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop abandoning your peace just to avoid losing someone. And ironically, the more detached you become from needing validation, the more magnetic you become, because desperation repels. Peace attracts. People can feel emotional dependence. They can feel when someone is trying to extract worth from them. Detached people don't do that. Their energy says, I appreciate you, but I do not need you to survive. That energy is powerful because it comes from wholeness, not lack, not fear, not emptiness. But here's where detachment becomes truly misunderstood. People think detached individuals stop loving deeply. The opposite is true. Detached people often love deeper than anyone else. Why? Because their love is not poisoned by possession. Possessive love says, you are mine. Detached love says, I choose you freely. Possessive love controls. Detached love respects. Possessive love fears loss constantly. Detached love trusts the present moment. Most relationships fail because people confuse attachment with intimacy. Attachment is fear-based. Intimacy is truth-based. Attachment says, don't leave me. Intimacy says, let's grow together. And there is a massive emotional difference between those two energies. Attachment suffocates. Detachment allows breathing room. This is why emotionally healthy relationships require two whole individuals, not two emotionally starving people trying to consume each other for validation. When two incomplete people come together, they don't create love. They create dependency. And dependency eventually turns into resentment. Because no human being can carry the weight of becoming your entire emotional world. No person can heal all your wounds, fix all your insecurities, erase all your loneliness. That responsibility belongs to you. Detached people understand this. They stop making others responsible for their emotional stability, and that creates healthier love, cleaner love, more mature love. You begin to love people for who they are, not for how they make you feel about yourself. That changes everything. Most people are not actually attached to the person. They are attached to the feeling, the attention, the comfort, the validation, the escape from loneliness. But once the feeling changes, chaos begins. That's why many people stay in toxic relationships. Not because the relationship is healthy, because the attachment is addictive. And attachment behaves exactly like addiction. You crave emotional highs. You panic during emotional withdrawal. You obsess over inconsistency. You lose rational thinking. That is not love. That is emotional dependency disguised as romance. True detachment breaks addictive emotional patterns. It teaches you to ask powerful questions. Does this connection bring peace or chaos? Am I loved here or merely tolerated? Am I choosing this person from abundance or fear? These questions wake people up because many people are not in relationships. They are in emotional survival contracts. And survival is not love. Now listen carefully. Detachment also transforms ambition. Most people are emotionally attached to results. They believe, I'll finally feel worthy when I succeed. So they chase achievement obsessively. But attached ambition creates suffering. Because your self-worth becomes tied to outcomes. If you fail, you feel worthless. If you lose, you collapse emotionally. If things don't go according to plan, you panic. Detached ambition is different. Detached people still work hard, still dream big, still pursue greatness, but they are not emotionally destroyed by outcomes. Why? Because their identity exists beyond success. They understand something most people never realize. You can control effort. You cannot fully control results. And once you deeply understand that anxiety decreases dramatically, the Bhagavad Gita teaches, you have the right to action but not to the fruits of action, meaning focus on your effort. Release obsession with outcomes. That is elite mental peace. Most anxiety comes from trying to emotionally control the future. But the future is uncontrollable. Detached people focus on what they can influence, their discipline, their mindset, their actions, their integrity, and then they let life unfold. This doesn't make them passive, it makes them powerful. Because emotional attachment clouds judgment. Fear of failure creates hesitation. Fear of rejection creates self-betrayal. Fear of loss creates desperation. Detached minds think clearly. And clarity is dangerous. Now understand another truth. Detachment will make some people uncomfortable, especially people who benefited from your emotional dependence. When you stop chasing, they notice. When you stop over-explaining, they notice. When you stop begging for attention, they notice. When you stop tolerating disrespect, they really notice. Because your emotional independence changes the entire dynamic. Suddenly, manipulation stops working, guilt stops working, inconsistency stops controlling your emotional games. Lose power, and people who relied on your attachment may call you different. You are different. You are finally waking up. Detached people stop reacting emotionally to everything. That alone changes their life. Not every message deserves a response. Not every insult deserves energy. Not every misunderstanding deserves a war. Most people leak energy constantly because they react to everything emotionally. Detached people conserve emotional energy. And emotional energy is life force. Where your attention goes, your life goes. That's why detached people become calmer, stronger, more focused, because they stop feeding chaos emotionally. Imagine your mind as a house. Every argument you replay, every rejection you obsess over, every opinion you fear is like allowing strangers to enter your home and rearrange the furniture. Eventually, your inner world becomes chaos. Detachment locks the door. Not out of bitterness, out of wisdom. You become selective about what deserves access to your peace, and peace becomes sacred. Modern society trains people into emotional attachment constantly. Social media runs on attachment. Attachment to validation, attachment to comparison, attachment to attention. People become emotionally dependent on likes, messages, notifications, approval. Their nervous system becomes addicted to stimulation and silence starts feeling unbearable. Detached people reclaim their nervous system. They become comfortable without constant validation, comfortable without constant attention, comfortable without performing for the world. And this creates inner stillness, a stillness that most people never experience, because most people are overstimulated constantly. Their mind never rests. Detached people learn the art of emotional silence, not suppression, silence, the ability to sit peacefully without needing distraction, and in that silence wisdom emerges. You begin noticing patterns. You notice how attachment creates suffering repeatedly. You notice how chasing drains dignity. You notice how emotional impulsiveness destroys peace. And slowly your standards rise. You stop entertaining confusion. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop fighting for places where your soul feels unwelcome. That is growth, not arrogance. Growth. Now let's speak about forgiveness, because true detachment requires forgiveness, not because people deserve it, because you deserve peace. Many people remain emotionally attached to pain for years. They replay betrayals endlessly, replay disrespect endlessly, replay heartbreak endlessly. And they unknowingly become spiritually chained to the very people who hurt them. Hatred is attachment too. Remember that. Obsessing over someone negatively still gives them emotional ownership over your mind. Detached people release that ownership. They forgive strategically, not to excuse behavior, but to free themselves emotionally. Because carrying resentment is like drinking poison and hoping the other person suffers. Forgiveness is emotional liberation, and liberation restores peace. Now, here is one of the deepest truths about detachment. Detachment teaches you how to lose gracefully. Most people never learn this skill, so every ending destroys them. A breakup destroys them. A failure destroys them. A rejection destroys them because they built their identity around permanence. Detached people understand endings are part of life. And because they accept endings, they suffer less when endings arrive. Acceptance is not weakness. Acceptance is reality without resistance, and resistance creates suffering. Imagine arguing with rain. No matter how angry you become, the rain still falls. Detached people stop arguing with reality. They adapt instead. This creates emotional strength that feels almost supernatural. People look at detached individuals and think, how are they so calm? Because they stopped fighting reality emotionally. They flow with life instead of wrestling it constantly. That is inner mastery. And here's the irony. The less attached you become to forcing life, the more life begins flowing naturally. Opportunities come easier, relationships become healthier, your mind becomes clearer, because desperation creates resistance. Peace creates alignment. Now understand this carefully. Detachment is not giving up on life. It is finally trusting yourself enough to stop clinging. It is understanding that if something leaves, you will survive. If something changes, you will adapt. If something ends, your life still continues. That confidence changes your entire energy. Fear decreases. Neediness disappears. Inner stability grows. And stability is attractive in every area of life, in relationships, in leadership, in business, in friendships. Because emotionally stable people create emotional safety. Now let's go even deeper. The highest level of detachment is detachment from ego. Most suffering is ego suffering. I need to be respected. I need to be right. I need people to admire me. I need to win. And ego turns life into constant emotional warfare. Detached people stop protecting ego constantly. They become teachable, flexible, peaceful. They stop taking everything personally, and once you stop taking everything personally, life becomes lighter. Someone rejects you, not personal. Someone misunderstands you, not personal. Someone dislikes you, not personal. People react from their own wounds, beliefs, fears, and experiences. Detached people understand this deeply. And understanding creates compassion, not weakness, compassion. Because detached people no longer see themselves as the center of the universe, and that realization is deeply liberating. Ego says, everything happening around me is about me. Wisdom says, most people are fighting battles I know nothing about. That perspective softens the heart without weakening the spirit. You stop reacting from pride. And pride has destroyed more relationships, dreams, and opportunities than failure ever has. Sometimes people stay in emotional pain simply because their ego refuses to let go. They don't miss the person. They miss winning. They miss being chosen. They miss feeling important. And ego disguises itself as love constantly. Detached people become honest enough to see this, and honesty transforms them. Now, here is where detachment becomes spiritual. Because eventually, you realize life itself is temporary. Every person you love, every moment you experience, every possession you own, every achievement you reach, temporary. At first, this truth feels terrifying, but later it becomes beautiful. Because impermanence gives life meaning. If flowers never died, you would stop admiring them. If moments lasted forever, you would stop valuing them. Detached people understand this deeply. So instead of desperately clinging to life, they experience it fully, they become present. And presence is the hidden gift of detachment. Attachment lives in the future. What if they leave? What if I fail? What if things change? Detachment brings you back to now, to this breath, this moment, this experience, right here, right now. And that is where peace lives, not in controlling tomorrow, but in fully inhabiting today. Most people miss their own life because they are mentally elsewhere, regretting the past, fearing the future, obsessing over outcomes. Detached people return to the present repeatedly, and the present heals them. That's why mindfulness and detachment are deeply connected. Mindfulness teaches observation without judgment. Detachment teaches involvement without possession. Together, they create emotional freedom. Now listen carefully to this. Detachment does not mean you stop grieving. When you lose someone, you will still hurt. When your heart breaks, you will still cry. When life disappoints you, you will still feel pain. Detachment does not remove human emotion. It removes emotional imprisonment. There's a difference. Pain is natural. Suffering becomes prolonged when attachment refuses to release reality. Detached people allow grief to move through them naturally. They don't suppress it. They don't dramatize it endlessly either. They honor it. Then they continue living. That is emotional maturity. Most people either avoid pain entirely or build a permanent home inside it. Detached people do neither. They move through emotions like seasons. Winter comes, winter goes, and this emotional fluidity creates extraordinary resilience. You stop fearing emotions because you realize emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent identities. You're not your sadness, not your anger, not your fear. You are the awareness observing them. And that awareness becomes stronger through detachment. Now, let's speak about self-respect. Because true detachment is impossible without self-respect. People who lack self-respect become emotionally available to anyone. They tolerate inconsistency, disrespect manipulation, neglect emotional breadcrumbs, because they fear abandonment more than self-betrayal. Detached people reverse this. They fear self-betrayal more than abandonment. That changes everything because now your standards become stronger than your loneliness, and standards protect peace. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your energy. Not everyone deserves repeated chances. Not everyone deserves your emotional investment. Detached people learn discernment. And discernment is wisdom in action. You stop confusing potential with reality. You stop falling in love with imagined versions of people. You stop trying to rescue emotionally unavailable individuals. Because you realize love cannot heal someone who refuses to heal themselves. That realization alone can save years of suffering. Now here's another hidden truth. Detachment improves decision-making. Emotionally attached people make emotional decisions. And emotional decisions often create long-term pain. People stay too long because they are attached. People chase too hard because they are attached. People ignore red flags because they are attached. Attachment clouds perception. Detached people see clearly. They ask, what is actually happening here? Not, what do I desperately hope is happening? That clarity protects them. This is why detached individuals often appear emotionally powerful. Because they are no longer ruled by fantasy, reality becomes enough, and reality, when accepted clearly, becomes easier to navigate. Now, let's speak about silence. One of the strongest signs of emotional detachment is the ability to remain silent when silence protects peace. Weak people react immediately. They need the last word, instant validation, immediate emotional release. Detached people understand timing. Not every battle deserves participation. Not every accusation deserves defense. Not every misunderstanding deserves explanation. Sometimes silence is emotional intelligence. Sometimes walking away is wisdom. And sometimes protecting your peace is more important than protecting your image. That level of emotional control changes lives. Because emotional impulsiveness destroys more futures than lack of intelligence ever will. A single emotional reaction can ruin relationships, careers, opportunities, reputations. Detached people slow down emotionally. They observe first, respond second. That pause creates power. Now understand this carefully. Detachment also changes your relationship with success. Most people become addicted to achievement because achievement temporarily fills emotional emptiness. So no success is ever enough. They reach one goal, then instantly chase another. Not from inspiration, from inner emptiness. Detached people still strive, but they are no longer emotionally starving. So they can enjoy success without becoming consumed by it. They stop tying identity to productivity. And this is crucial in modern society. Because today, people are valued more for performance than humanity. People feel guilty for resting, guilty for slowing down, guilty for simply existing without producing. Detached people reject this conditioning. They understand their worth is not measured by endless achievement. That realization creates peace. Now let's go even deeper. The highest form of detachment is trusting life itself. Not blindly, not foolishly, but deeply. Trusting that what leaves creates space. What breaks teaches wisdom. What hurts creates growth. What changes creates evolution. Detached people stop seeing every painful experience as punishment. Sometimes life removes things because they no longer align with your growth. But attached people resist every ending so aggressively they block new beginnings. Think about how many people stay trapped in dead chapters because they refuse to release the old story. Old identities, old relationships, old dreams, old versions of themselves. Detached people evolve because they are not emotionally chained to who they used to be, and evolution requires letting go. A snake cannot grow without shedding old skin. Neither can you. Now listen carefully. One of the most powerful things detachment teaches is this: you do not need closure from everyone. Most people remain emotionally stuck because they keep waiting for explanations, apologies, understanding, justice. But closure is often self-created. Detached people stop waiting for other people to heal their emotions. They create peace internally, and that is true power. Because some people will never apologize. Some people will never understand your pain. Some people will rewrite history to protect their ego. Detached people stop chasing emotional resolution from emotionally immature people. They release the need, and release restores freedom. Now, imagine how different your life becomes when rejection no longer destroys your confidence endings, no longer terrify you loneliness, no longer controls you opinions, no longer define you uncertainty, no longer paralyzes you. That is what detachment creates. Not coldness, freedom, the freedom to live fully without emotional chains, the freedom to love deeply without losing yourself, the freedom to walk away from chaos without guilt, the freedom to protect your peace unapologetically, and perhaps most importantly, the freedom to finally meet yourself beyond fear. Because underneath attachment, there is usually fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not being enough, fear of losing control, fear of being forgotten. Detachment forces you to confront those fears honestly. And once confronted, they begin losing power over you. That is why detachment feels terrifying at first, but liberating later. It is the death of illusion and the birth of inner peace. So, how do you begin practicing detachment in daily life? Start small. Observe your emotional triggers. Notice what controls your mood instantly. Notice where your peace becomes dependent on external things. That awareness is the first step. Then begin creating emotional space. Pause before reacting. Breathe before responding. Reflect before chasing. Practice being alone without distraction. Practice saying no without guilt. Practice walking away from disrespect the first time. Practice allowing uncertainty to exist without trying to control everything. Little by little, your nervous system changes, your mind becomes quieter, your emotional world becomes lighter. And eventually, You realize something beautiful. You can love people deeply without abandoning yourself. You can care fully without controlling outcomes. You can experience life completely without clinging to it desperately. That is mastery. That is freedom. That is the art of detachment without going cold. And once you learn it, nobody can emotionally imprison you again.